I'm Jason, 29 years old. I work for a newspaper company. Lately, I've become more confident in my job and have started to feel more decisive when mentoring my juniors. I got married last year. Emily, who worked at a coffee chain tenant in our company building. She became quite popular. Many customers came just to see her, as she was considered one of the pretty staff members. I was over the moon when she secretly gave me her contact information inside the store. It was unbelievable. We had casual chats during her shifts, but I never expected Emily to be interested in me. Everything progressed smoothly from there. Of course, due to work, frequent dates weren't possible, but we kept in close contact, and I made sure to visit the shop whenever Emily was working. On our days off, I spent as much time as possible with her. After dating for a year, I proposed, and we did our best to fulfill Emily's wishes for the wedding. A garden wedding amidst a profusion of blooming roses. A wedding dress with a rose motif. Emily, holding a bouquet of white and yellow roses, looked truly beautiful. Even after marriage, work keeps me busy. It's regrettable that I don't get as much time with Emily as I had hoped, but when I return to our new condo, she always has dinner ready. She sits across from me at the dinner table, sipping coffee with a smile, and shares stories about her day. It feels like a waste that she quit her job to focus on supporting me, but when she cutely says, "I don't want us to live like ships passing in the night," I can help but feel it's not so bad. The only shadow in my otherwise smooth-sailing life is my boss, Michael. Michael has been my supervisor since he transferred to our department 5 years ago, and our relationship wasn't bad at first. We had a decent trust as boss and subordinate. But at some point, he started kicking garbage cans and chairs near my desk as if by accident and responded to my greetings with a jerk of his chin and no words. Sometimes, he even fails to notify me about important matters. "Michael, what's going on lately? Did you do something? Or maybe you were a fan of Emily?" My colleague Chris jokes in an attempt to lighten the mood. So far, it hasn't impacted my work significantly. Emily says she doesn't even remember Michael. Maybe it's jealousy over a subordinate having a beautiful wife. I thought it would pass and decided to leave it be for a while. 2 years into our marriage, I was investigating a backdoor admission scandal at a university. The president was allegedly accepting money for admission favors. I almost had solid evidence and cooperation from an insider, just a step away from completing the article. Then, one day, I was called into the president's office. There were President Thompson, Michael, and Luke, my informant. "Luke, why are you here?" "I'm here because you said you wouldn't disclose my identity. The president called me in today. You were the only one I was in contact with. What about my future now? It's all messed up," Luke yelled angrily. I hadn't shared his personal information with anyone in the company. Despite my strict information management, how did this leak? "Jason, given the situation, we must assume the president is aware of our investigation. They will have prepared counter-arguments for any evidence we present. We'll continue the investigation, but you need to step back for now. We'll contact you later. Stay at home in the meantime. We will also compensate Luke." Stunned by President Thompson's words, I realized that there was nothing I could do at the moment. As I was leaving the president's office, I raised my head to see Michael's face, unsuccessfully trying to hide his delight behind a solemn expression, with a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. In that moment, I had an intuition that Michael was involved in this. I hadn't shared anything about Luke with him, my boss or not. But I had no proof. When I got home, Emily greeted me with a smile. It was hard to share the company troubles, but I couldn't keep it from her. "Emily, there's been trouble at work, and it looks like I might be held responsible. I'll have to stay at home for a while." What happens after that? I couldn't tell what Emily's expression was as she looked down. "I'm not sure yet. but I think I'll be losing my current position." "Understood. I'll go back to my parents' house for a while. Let me know when things settle down." With that, Emily quickly packed her things and left the house without asking for further details. Later, I received a transfer order. This branch, located in the founder's hometown, has been downsized several times and faced closure, but it seems to exist solely because of its historical significance. Emily didn't come with me. When I informed her about the transfer over the phone, she simply said, "I can't go to the countryside, the salary will be much less, right?" and hung up. Later, my father-in-law came with the divorce papers already filled out. "I thought I could trust you with Emily. It's a shame it has come to this, but it seems she's not willing to support you. It's better for both of you to go your separate ways. I'm sorry. I should have brought her here by force." It turned out that Emily needed a husband who worked for a somewhat reputable company. That must be why she never complained about my late returns home. I didn't care anymore and signed the divorce papers on the spot. Life at the branch was peaceful. The staff was kind, and though they must have known the reason for my demotion, they never mentioned it. But I hesitated to get deeply involved with them and kept my distance on my days off. Most of my assignments were peaceful, like store introductions and culture columns. They might be assigning these to help me get accustomed to the area. After always having hectic days since joining the company, living like this might not be so bad. And so, life at the branch went on. Amidst all this, I was summoned to the main office after a long time. I was required to attend a meeting about Thori information management. Of course, due to the incident involving me, absence was not an option. Early one morning, as I was walking to the station, I saw someone crouched down in the station square. Rushing over, I found an elderly woman with white hair, panting and in distress. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'll be fine," she replied weakly, trying to stand up, but she suddenly collapsed. I supported her, but she seemed to have lost consciousness. Laying her down, I called for an ambulance. "Is this an accident or a medical emergency?" The operator's voice helped me regain some composure. "A medical emergency. An elderly woman has collapsed in front of the station. The ambulance is on its way. Please tell me about the patient's condition. Is she breathing?" When I told the operator that her breathing had stopped, they said, "Please secure the airway and start CPR with chest compressions. Do you know how to do it?" I have attended a training course before. Following the operator's instructions, I started compressing her chest. The elderly lady's chest sank under the pressure, which made me anxious. I remembered being taught to do so, but her consciousness and breathing did not return. I was afraid her frail body might break. Could she die right here in front of me? Just when I felt almost crushed by anxiety, the elderly lady suddenly gasped for air with a sharp gasp. Relief washed over me as I heard the distant sound of a siren. Tears mixed with sweat, creating a mess on my face. "The patient is here. Please come with us in the ambulance," said the arriving paramedics. I got into the ambulance and explained the situation. I was passing by when I saw her crouching in pain, so I approached her, but after trying to stand up, she lost consciousness. "So, she's not a relative of yours. Could you please explain the situation again at the hospital?" "Understood." Upon arriving at the hospital and speaking with the staff, I was released. However, I didn't feel like moving right away. I bought a hot coffee from a vending machine and sat down on the hard hospital sofa. I wondered if the elderly lady was all right. It was too late to make it to the meeting on time, so I needed to call and inform them. But I couldn't just not attend. From here, I could take a taxi to the nearest station. I didn't want to go, but I had no choice. Excuse me, thank you so much for helping her." A young woman, accompanied by hospital staff, approached me. "You're the one who brought in our patient, right?" She's recovered. This is her granddaughter, and she wants to thank you. Thank you for finding my grandmother. She was saved because you found her and acted quickly. I really appreciate it, she said. She appeared to have rushed over, wearing no makeup and glasses. She flicked her hair and thanked me. It's all right, I'm glad she's okay. Now, I must be going. Wait, were you heading to catch a train? Were you going into town? Let me drive you there, please. I tried to decline, insisting she should stay with her grandmother, but she insisted and drove me to the nearest station. In the car, I excused myself to call the head office and inform them of my delay. Though it was unavoidable, I felt heavy-hearted. She asked for my contact details, but I didn't want any further involvement, so I left using the train's timing as an excuse. The meeting went terribly. Although I had informed them that I was late due to a life-saving emergency, the nature of the meeting made it uncomfortable. I could feel the cold stares and the sarcasm in the speaker's words. I tried to investigate how the information had leaked after that incident, but found no leads. I thought I had been very careful with my notebook and digital tools to prevent any leaks. Where could the leak have come from? I had no idea. I searched for spy tools or hidden cameras but found nothing. Hearing familiar instructions on information management, I returned home feeling drained. A week later, something unexpected happened. A call came to the newspaper office. It was from Eleanor, the elderly woman I had saved that day, asking me to visit her home to express her gratitude. I should be the one visiting you, but my granddaughter won't let me go out. You saved my life, and I really want to thank you. It's difficult to refuse a request from an elderly lady. Moreover, somehow, she knew both my workplace and my name. Refusing and risking her coming to the office would be awkward in front of my colleagues. I agreed to visit her on my next day off. The address she gave led me to a tasteful house. The well-maintained garden seemed to reflect the character of its inhabitants. As I rang the doorbell, I heard quick footsteps and the door opened. "Welcome, Jason. We've been expecting you." Rachel, the granddaughter I met at the hospital, greeted me with a bright smile. Unlike that day, she had her long hair beautifully styled and was wearing a sky blue dress. Presumably wearing contact lenses today, she wasn't wearing her glasses. "Please come in. My grandmother has been eagerly waiting for you in the living room," she assured me in, where the grandmother sat comfortably on a chair in the living room. "Oh my, you're Jason. Thank you for coming. I don't know how to thank you enough. You're my lifesaver. I really appreciate it," she said. I was worried since she was not allowed to go out, but she seemed livelier than I expected. "My granddaughter Rachel has prepared some food. Please have some." I helped a little, though I might have made more work for her. It's the thought that counts, right? Haha. She seemed like a cheerful and lovely elderly lady. I was truly relieved that she didn't die right in front of me. While I was thinking this, Rachel brought out dish after dish. Mashed potatoes, braised chicken and vegetables, and pickled vegetables. The table looked like my family's during a festive occasion, bringing back nostalgic feelings. Emily usually prepared Western-style dishes, and since our separation, I had mostly eaten out or had fast food, so it had been a while since I had homemade food. "Do you like wine, Jason? We have some bottles we received as gifts, but we can't finish them by ourselves. It would be a waste to let them lose their flavor just sitting around. Would you like some?" I was going to decline, but the brand she offered piqued my interest. "By the way, how did you know where I work and my name? I don't recall telling you." "You must have told the hospital staff, right? I knew your name when we first met, and look at this." With a flourish, Rachel pulled out my business card from her pocket. "It was in the car. Maybe you dropped it when you called. My family would have scolded me if I couldn't find out how to contact you. Lucky you dropped it." She laughed mischievously, just like her grandmother. It seemed she had prepared to show me the card. Eleanor was on her way to New York to meet her husband, who was there for work. Disliking the hustle and bustle, she usually lived here, but she would visit him on a whim. Once she makes up her mind, she leaves with just a note, so Rachel, who lives with her, is understandably worried. However, seeing her grandmother enjoy her outings, they now joke about it, saying, "When I wake up in the morning, Grandma has disappeared." But incidents like this one made it no laughing matter. "My grandfather wanted to meet you too, but he had to return to the company urgently. He asked me to convey his deepest gratitude. They're still very much in love, you know." The food and wine were delicious, and I indulged. Eleanor and Rachel were great conversationalists, and before I knew it, I had shared everything. My demotion due to the leak, my swift abandonment by my wife whom I thought loved me, and the realization that she probably never loved me. Eleanor looked at me and said, "Why don't we bring those two to justice together?" Together, I wondered, what did she mean? Eleanor as an avenger, it was an odd thought. It seemed impossible. As I was puzzled, Rachel laughed mischievously. "By the way, I forgot to introduce myself properly in my rush. I'm Rachel Thompson." "Oh, but my grandmother must have mentioned my name when she invited you here, Jason. Does the name Thompson ring a bell in this area?" Suddenly it clicked. Thompson, the founding family's name, and this was the founding location. So that meant I am, in a manner of speaking, the chairman's wife. I'm the president's daughter. They looked at each other and laughed. But Eleanor quickly became serious again. "Listening to your story, Jason, it seems wise to investigate possibilities other than your mistake. Michael, was it? There's no evidence, but he doesn't leave a good impression. And your ex-wife, her actions were too hasty upon hearing your story. It might be good to look into her as well." Her husband, the chairman, hated dishonesty and had run the newspaper with that principle. People who shared his beliefs had built up the company. Now, Eleanor's son and Rachel's father, President Thompson, was in charge. The idea of corruption in such a company was intolerable to them. 2 months later, I was back at the head office. Michael, who had called the meeting, entered the conference room. "Long time no see, Michael. You know why you've called me here, right?" "No, I don't. Maybe you're here for a promotion celebration." Anger rose inside me as Michael played dumb. It turned out he was the one who leaked the information to the university. And it was Emily who had informed him of my investigation. Michael and Emily were alumni of the same university and had dated for a while. However, Michael married another woman. Whether Emily working at the coffee shop in the newspaper building was a coincidence or her pursuit was unclear. But she dated me and we got married. Behind the scenes, she had rekindled her relationship with Michael. "Emily informed you about the contents of my notebook, didn't she?" When I confronted her with evidence of infidelity, she easily confessed everything. "It's just a lie because she's upset that I dumped her. She's been a nuisance following me around since the old days." As Michael spat out these words, the conference room door swung open and President Thompson walked in. "You really don't give up, do you, Michael? Using the car phone for your scheming was a sloppy move. There's plenty of evidence left behind, and it seems there are other matters too." Smirking, President Thompson waved his cell phone, and Michael, dumbfounded, hung his head. It was an abrupt conclusion, but he seemed to have resigned himself to the situation. I wasn't told what was on the cell phone, but it appeared Michael had several other offenses. Following President Thompson, the HR director, David, escorted Michael out of the conference room. An inquiry was to follow, with disciplinary actions to be decided thereafter. Alone with President Thompson, he apologized. "Jason, I'm sorry. We failed to investigate properly and hastily moved you from your department to the branch office. From the inquiries we've conducted, We heard consistently that you were an outstanding journalist and it's impossible for Jason to leak information. If you're willing, we'd like you to return to the main office. Thanks for the offer, but I like my current job. If you're willing to consider my request, I'd like to continue working at the branch. Plus, encountering Eleanor Thompson and this incident happened because I was there. Not everything was bad. Saying this aloud, any lingering regrets about the main office vanished. I returned to the branch, continuing to cover heartwarming local news. Eleanor Thompson, still experiencing some paralysis, often had meals with us, joined by President Thompson, who seemed concerned for her. I started dating Rachel. President Thompson and Eleanor had me cornered. I had no intention of running, nor did it seem passable. Recently, Rachel asked me, "What do you think about a reverse proposal?" But I just laughed at official. The problem is Rachel is an only child, but I think a proposal should come from me, not in reverse. Don't forget to be grateful. People live by supporting each other. If you see someone in trouble, help them out. I was raised hearing these words from my grandmother since I was a child. Never did I imagine that such a thing would happen to me, living with these words close to my heart. My name is David. I grew up carefree, surrounded by my loving parents. It was a life of happiness without any want. However, during elementary school, both of my parents fell one after the other and passed away. Although I was still young, I understood what death meant. The thought of never being able to see my parents again made me so sad that I remember crying incessantly. My grandparents were the ones who took me in during that time. From now on, Grandpa and Grandma will create lots of fun memories for you, David. My grandmother said kindly, comforting me. Having retired, they were living a relaxed life, but started working again after I came to live with them. They managed to find new jobs for acquaintances, but the salary wasn't much, so we lived in poverty. Nevertheless, they never forgot to be thankful for their jobs and worked cheerfully, expressing gratitude. Grandpa and Grandma always remembered to be thankful to those around them. Even though our circumstances weren't the best, they never complained. "Why can you be so kind?" I was curious and asked them once. To which my grandmother replied, "People live by supporting each other. We're able to live today thanks to others. That's why we must never forget to be grateful to those around us." Even as a child, her words resonated with me. I thought my grandparents were wonderful people, and I wanted to be like them. I grew up never forgetting those words and eventually entered middle school. To save money for a uniform, I wore one that my cousin had used. It was worn out but still wearable. Wearing it to the entrance ceremony, I noticed some students giggling and saying, "He's the only one with a rag uniform." Feeling anxious about what might happen, my fears soon became a reality. The next day, as I went to school, those who had been laughing came up to me. "Hey, why are you wearing such a uniform?" Max, who seemed to be the leader, asked me. I can't believe how rude he is. I felt uncomfortable inside, but honestly explained the situation. Then Max and the other bullies started laughing at me mockingly. "No parents and no money, huh? That's so pathetic. I can't believe you can come to school like that." I'd be too embarrassed and would probably skip school. I was astonished by their cruel words. I thought about retorting, but then reconsidered, thinking there was no need to bother with such people, and simply ignored them. However, it seemed my attitude didn't sit well with them. From that point on, I became a constant target of their bullying. They hid my things and hit me under the guise of playing wrestling, and the bullying was quite severe. The teacher turned a blind eye, and I didn't want to worry my grandparents, so I didn't tell them. I thought it would subside eventually, but the bullying continued relentlessly. There was another student in my class who was also a target of bullying. Her name was Emily. Actually, Emily and I lived nearby and have been good friends since elementary school. We were childhood friends. She was also from a poor family, but that made it easier for us to relate to each other without any reservations. Even when friends asked to come over to my house, I always made excuses not to invite them because I was embarrassed about our poverty. Emily understood my feelings well and promised she would never say anything hurtful about it. That's why Emily was special to me, and I only invited her to my house to play together. It seemed like Emily trusted me too, as she occasionally invited me over to her house. It wasn't just playing. We also talked about our dreams for the future. I loved machines, so back then, I dreamt of building robots when I grew up. When I shared this with her, she lit up and said, "That's amazing. I'd love to see a robot you build." I was really happy to have my dream genuinely supported. Even in middle school, Emily and I continued to play together. Gradually, I began to develop romantic feelings for her. However, when Max and his group found out that Emily's family was also poor, they started to harass her. They tried to touch her forcibly and broke her things, doing whatever they pleased. On the other hand, I couldn't just stand by and watch my important friend being bullied. One day, when I saw Max and his gang holding Emily in a headlock, I remembered my grandmother's words, "Help those who are in trouble." I bravely stepped in between them. "Hey, she's a girl. Stop it." Even though I was angry, Max and his group just sneered. "What's with you, man? Do you like Emily or something? You two poor people are perfect for each other," Max taunted. I finally lost my temper. "Shut up. Enough is enough. If you bully Emily again, I won't let it slide." My outburst made the bullies falter a bit, and after throwing some parting insults, they ran off. Emily thanked me repeatedly. "Thank you. I was so scared. Thank you for helping me." "It's okay. We're friends, after all. Helping out is natural," I replied. Hearing this, Emily looked worried. "But are you sure it's okay? I'm worried they might bully you even more now." I was a bit scared of retaliation, but I smiled to reassure her. "Don't worry about it. Those guys are nothing." Really, Emily still looked uneasy, but I tried to calm her down, saying not to worry. Unfortunately, our fears came true. From the next day, Max and his gang stopped bullying Emily. Instead, their harassment towards me escalated. They mixed dirt in my school lunch and physically assaulted me, which was quite severe. Emily felt guilty and once cried, apologizing, "I'm sorry you're being bullied because of me." I never thought for a moment that it was Emily's fault. Rather, I felt pathetic for letting my dear friend go through such hard times. The bullying didn't stop for the entire first year of middle school. If Emily hadn't been there to support me, I might have ended up skipping school. Fortunately, in our second year, we were in different classes from Max and his group, so the bullying subsided considerably. Both Emily and I were deeply relieved. Time passed, and as we became third-year students, it was time to decide on our future paths. I had decided to get a job. It was due to financial reasons at home. I had a secret dream of building robots, and I wanted to pursue further education for that, but I didn't want to burden my grandparents anymore. Academically, I could have gone on to higher education, and both my teacher and grandparents encouraged it. The salary is different between a middle school and high school graduate. Besides, we want David to study as much as he likes. Grandma said this to me, but I knew they were struggling quite a bit. I wanted to join the workforce as soon as possible to ease their burden. Claiming I'm not that fond of studying, I overcame their objections and pursued the path of employment. Being a middle school graduate limited my options, and I eventually got a job at a cleaning company. The job was far from home, so I had to live on my own. At that time, I decided to put away my dream. Although it wasn't the company I had longed for, once I started working, I found the job rewarding. It felt good to see a dirty place become clean, and hearing "thank you for cleaning" gave me a sense of fulfillment for being able to help others. The work was physically demanding, and some people quit soon after starting, but I persevered. I was determined to do my best in what I could do at the moment. Gradually, my hard work began to be recognized by other employees. "People have come and gone, but you're the hardest worker we've had. We're really glad you joined us," they even said. My salary gradually increased, and I was able to send money back to my grandparents. They had been very worried about me, a middle school graduate entering the workforce, so my remittances seemed to relieve them a lot. When I sent money for the first time, Grandma even called me. "To receive remittances from you, you've really grown up," she said, sounding a bit teary over the phone. I was glad, feeling that I was finally able to repay them for raising me. As my salary increased, I was entrusted with cleaning larger, more important clients' buildings. Some of these buildings were impressively large. One day, while cleaning one such building, I heard someone say, "Hey, isn't that David?" I turned around to see a well-built man in a suit standing there. "Who is this?" I pondered for a moment, but upon seeing his smirking face, I immediately remembered. It was Max, the leader of the bullying group from school. Unpleasant memories from my student days flooded back, but he continued talking without a care. "So, you're working as a janitor?" "Yay, that's right," I replied. "Huh?" Max looked at me with obvious disdain. "Right, you started working after middle school. Oh, tough life for the poor. I went to college and now work at Jones Corporation. High salary. Thanks to my degree. Guess I'm one of the winners," he said with his usual sarcasm. He still had a knack for being unpleasant. I just uttered some insincere praise like "that's impressive," and got through the encounter. After this day, our relationship from middle school seemed to revive. Max would come where I was cleaning and intentionally drop trash or spill coffee, harassing me. He hasn't changed at all inside. I was thoroughly exasperated. I even thought about reporting him to my boss and filing a complaint. Around that time, I received an invitation to a middle school reunion. The first thing that came to mind was Max's face. I didn't want to go if it meant seeing him, but on the other hand, there were people I wanted to see. After much deliberation, I decided to attend. On the day of the reunion, the venue was at a fancy hotel. Entering the place, I thought, I'm really not used to these kinds of places. Despite praying not to run into Max, he spotted me first. "Hey, it's David," he approached, bringing along a few of his friends, just like in middle school. "You're so poor, yet you come to such a fancy hotel," Max said, apparently drunk, holding a beer bottle, his face flushed. What a hassle. I wanted to ignore him, but he kept bothering me unilaterally. "A raggedy poor guy like you should just leave," he said, pointing the beer bottle at me. Splash! Before I knew it, I was drenched in beer. "He's gone too far." I was trembling with anger, but Max didn't stop. "Look at you, fitting for a poor guy. By the way, did everyone know? This guy works as a janitor after dropping out of middle school. Pathetic, right?" He belittled me by exposing my job. "I shouldn't have come here. I'm leaving." I hadn't been there for even 10 minutes, but I headed for the exit. That's when it happened. "David," a familiar voice called from behind. I turned around swiftly and saw a beautiful, glamorous woman. For a moment, I was so startled that I froze. But I recognized the familiar traces in her face. "Is that you, Emily?" She smiled brightly. "Correct. It's been since middle school, hasn't it? Have you been well?" Of course, I've been good. It's nostalgic, isn't it? Emily was the person I wanted to see. But Max interrupted our reunion. Well, she's gorgeous. How about going out for a drink with me after this? He said, trying to pick her up. It's astounding how someone who once bullied me could do such a thing. I was beyond anger and just felt dumbfounded. Emily seemed to feel the same and completely ignored him. Rejected, Max's face turned even redder. Refusing me. It's all your fault, David. A loser with a low salary. He rambled incoherently. Emily sighed, walked up to Max, and said, "This is not the time for such talk. Is your company even okay?" Confused about what she meant, Emily then grabbed my hand and said, "We don't need to be here. Let's go." We left the venue and went to a nearby cafe. I was curious about her earlier remark. What did you mean by Max's company being okay? Well, the company he works for is in financial trouble and on the brink of bankruptcy, Emily explained. What, really? Even though it's such a big corporation? I was astonished. It was hard to believe. It's true. Max is a low-level employee, so he seems unaware of it, Emily said. Why do you know about this, Emily? Well, I became a journalist. I heard about Jones Corporation while covering another company. I see, but it's surprising to hear you became a journalist, Emily. Weren't you quite shy in middle school? Emily took a sip of her coffee and paused. Actually, the reason I became a journalist is because of the help I got from you, David, during middle school. Back then, I couldn't do anything but receive help. I couldn't even stop the bullies. That's why I wanted to become a journalist like you. Someone with a sense of justice, pursuing what is right. That's flattering. Being praised for having a sense of justice made me feel a bit bashful. I had always thought that I made Emily worry more at that time, but it was good to know that I had been of some help. Emily straightened her posture. I wanted to tell you something today that I couldn't say back in middle school, she said. I instinctively sat up straighter. What could it be? Emily slowly began to speak. I've liked you since middle school. Would you go out with me? Joy slowly spread through me. I wondered if it was okay to be this happy. Really? The truth is, I've liked you since middle school too. I came today hoping to see you. Hearing this, Emily smiled. It's like a dream. Thank you. And so, we officially became a couple. We made plans to meet again and went our separate ways. I felt it was good I came despite the initial unpleasantness. A few days later, I went to clean a building housing Jones Corporation. The employees were bustling about, likely due to the company's bankruptcy, as reported in the news. Emily's information was accurate. Max had lost his job too and was struggling to find new employment. Apparently, he was often absent from work and frequently caused trouble with clients. His bad reputation had spread to various companies. Moreover, he had accumulated substantial debts due to gambling and drinking. Frankly, I thought it was self-inflicted. Finally, the bad guy got his comeuppance, a satisfying turn of events. There was a significant change at my workplace too. I was assigned to the new business development department. The department I was assigned to was indeed experimenting with various new ventures, mainly focusing on the development of cleaning robots. To my surprise, I was included in the development team. In fact, I had maintained my interest in robots since starting my job, studying them as a hobby. When I mentioned this to my boss, he arranged a meeting for me with the head of the development department. My self-taught knowledge impressed him, and he was surprised by the extent of it. He expressed a keen interest in having someone with my passion on the team, and thus my placement in the department was quickly decided. I never expected my childhood dream to come true in such a manner. Life is indeed unpredictable. I worked diligently there and developed a household cleaning robot, It turned out to be a huge hit. This success led to several promotions and a significant increase in my salary. Recently, I used some of that money to take my grandparents on a hot springs trip. Staying at a renowned inn, we enjoyed exceptional hot springs and cuisine. Grandpa and Grandma said it had been years since they last experienced such luxury and thoroughly savored their rare trip. I think I managed to repay them a bit more with this gesture. My relationship with Emily also progressed well. Despite our busy schedules, we continued to have regular dates. Then, on the 3rd anniversary of our dating, I proposed to Emily. She joyfully accepted the ring I offered. Emily's parents also approved of our marriage. I had been worried that they might reject me because I only graduated from middle school, but they were not the kind of people to worry about such things. David is someone we've known since he was in elementary school. We trust his character, so we're happy to give our daughter in marriage to him, they said, blessing our union. Of course, Grandpa and Grandma attended our wedding. Both were moved to tears, saying, "There's nothing happier than this. Congratulations." A year after our marriage, we had a child. It was a son. I plan to pass on to my son the lessons my grandmother taught me. We named him Nathan, hoping he would grow up to be kind to others. I believe that's the most important quality a person can have. Although my middle school years were filled with unpleasant memories, I'm glad I persevered and lived earnestly. Going forward, I want to continue living with a heart that cares for others. My ex-wife, Lisa, was a classmate of mine. At the reunion, she spotted me in my work clothes, hurled insults at me, and then doused me with beer. Unable to tolerate her terrible attitude, I left the venue, and right in front of me was a sleek black luxury car, a symbol of my successful life restart after our divorce. My name is Tom Harris. I grew up in an average household and am an utterly ordinary guy with an unremarkable personality, the kind you'd find anywhere. Raised in a normal family, I've lived a standard life. During my student days, I had a fair share of friends and led a pretty standard school life, devoid of any dramatic events. The maxim that I, an ordinary guy, always keep in mind comes from Mr. Johnson, my high school teacher. It's possible to overcome any difficulty. Live with perseverance. This phrase has always been with me, supporting me through everything. Thankfully, I haven't yet encountered a situation that made me desperately rely on these words, but I always make sure to remember them. As a nondescript student, I secretly admired my classmate, Lisa. Her constantly changing expressions, attentive way of listening to people, and occasionally feminine side profile were incredibly attractive to me. When we coincidentally ended up at the same university, I fancifully thought it was fate. Despite being such an inconspicuous student, I've always harbored a secret admiration for my classmate, Lisa. In contrast, I was just another face in the crowd, to the extent that some of my peers didn't even know my name. Yet, sometimes when the conversation turned to our high school days, Lisa would talk to me, and those small interactions made me incredibly happy. Such trivial things brought me joy, and that alone was enough to make me feel content. I was such a modest man. Nevertheless, by the time I graduated from college, I wanted to know where I stood. It was a long unrequited love since high school, and if there was no hope, it was better to give up and move on. Now was the chance. With a resolve of potentially facing rejection, I confessed to Lisa. "Yes, okay." Her unexpected reply made me wonder if I was dreaming. My days with Lisa, whom I'd long admired, were truly blissful. I've always tried to gift Lisa with whatever she desired. I worked hard, motivated by the joy of seeing her happy smile when she received my gifts. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and in my 3rd year as a working professional, I proposed. Wanting to fulfill Lisa's wish to be a housewife, I worked harder than ever. Though it was challenging to manage the expenses of 2 people in my 3rd year, my desire to make Lisa happy drove me to work diligently. Thankfully, my efforts paid off, and I managed an unusual career advancement, surpassing my colleagues and seniors. Employed by a major corporation, my salary was already above average, but with the promotion, I started earning an enviable amount. However, as my income increased, so did Lisa's frivolous spending in the name of self-improvement. While it wasn't threatening our livelihood yet, the seasonal brand bags and new clothes for every meal with friends added up. Each time I thought to speak up, seeing her happy made me hold back, thinking, if I work harder, it'll be fine. Looking back, I regret that my attitude might have contributed to her becoming careless. One day, during lunch break, I was having a coffee and chatting with my colleague, Susan. Suddenly, an internal email popped up on every employee's computer. Susan, who opened the email first, muttered, "No way," in disbelief. What I saw on her screen was shocking news. Due to poor company performance, a massive downsizing was announced. The email coldly listed the names of those to be laid off. As I anxiously scrolled through the list, both Susan's and my names appeared as those being laid off. I nearly dropped my coffee, feeling as if the world had gone dark around me. The employees on the list were all in their early 30s, contributors to the company in their own right. Including Susan and me, several of us approached President Smith to protest. However, President Smith said, "We targeted you because you're young and have ample opportunities for reemployment. I'm sorry, but please understand our situation." He apologized deeply with a polite tone, but there was no emotion in his words. It seemed like he was just apologizing to get through the situation. That's all it seemed to me. We realized arguing with President Smith was futile and had no choice but to accept the layoff. "What will you do now?" Susan asked quietly. "I haven't decided anything yet. I need to talk it over with my wife." "What about you, Susan? What are you planning to do?" While packing up my personal items around my desk, I asked Susan. "I think I might go back to my parents' place," she replied. "Your dad runs his own company, right? So you'll have something to fall back on for now." Speaking in as a cheerful tone as possible, she said, "Yeah, that's right," unaware at the time that Susan's voice was on the verge of tears. On my way home, I pondered what to do next. First, I thought about how to break the news to Lisa. I had worked so hard. Surely, she would understand. Even if I couldn't find another job right away, Lisa would surely support me. I had severance pay, so I could use that while looking for work. Reassured by these thoughts, I quickened my pace home, feeling slightly more optimistic. As soon as I got home and muttered about being laid off, Lisa gasped, "What? No way," turning pale. I understood her reaction. It was only natural to be anxious. "It's tough, but let's work through this together," I began. But before I could finish, Lisa looked straight at me and said, "Let's get divorced." What? I was stunned. "If you don't have a job lined up, then we should get divorced. A man without a job, who can't spend money on me, is worthless. I don't need you," Lisa spat out. Everything went dark before my eyes. I couldn't find the words to argue back as Lisa bombarded me with cruel words. "I married you thinking we'd have financial freedom with your job at a major company. My calculations were wrong." These words echoed in my ears. In the end, Lisa had never loved me from the start. She knew I had admired her since high school and assumed that with my job at a major company, there would eventually be financial stability. She thought she could eventually have the freedom to do as she pleased. I found myself wondering if this is what they mean by love cooling in an instant, even after 100 years. It felt surreal, almost like it was happening to someone else. Watching the woman ranting before me, I even questioned whether she was truly the woman I had married. As Lisa continued to list her grievances, I felt a growing revulsion and said, "All right, let's get divorced." I couldn't settle my emotions or start job hunting until the divorce was finalized. Finally divorced, I began searching for work in earnest. Though I knew it was a tough job market, I hadn't expected it to be this hard to find work, given my smooth career until then. Initially, I looked for jobs where I could use the skills I had developed in my previous role, but nothing came up. Despite having some savings, the urgency to find a new job soon began to set in. As my applications were repeatedly rejected, I realized I couldn't be choosy and started applying for jobs in fields where I had no experience. Although I believed I had average physical strength, I wasn't part of an athletic club, so I still tried to avoid jobs that required heavy labor. However, I ended up interviewing for some labor-intensive roles, and one company's president, Mr. Williams, was very kind. He listened intently to my story of being laid off. "It'll be tough at first, but we'll support you fully. Why don't you work with us?" he offered. By then, I was ready to accept any job offer. The job was mainly office work, but being a construction company, it involved some physical labor. Nobody blamed me for being less strong or slower than others, and I was grateful for everyone's support. I wasn't repaying a favor, but I used my skills to the fullest, making improvements within the company. Thanks to that, I gained trust from Mr. Williams and my colleagues. I felt truly fortunate to have joined this company. Just as I was getting comfortable with my job, I received a notice for a high school reunion. Unpleasant memories resurfaced. I didn't want to see Lisa's face again. But I did want to see Mr. Johnson, my former teacher. After some thought, I decided to attend the reunion. I was getting ready to leave when an unexpected work call came in. Without hesitation, I quickly changed into my work clothes and headed to the job site. It took longer than expected, and by the time I arrived at the reunion, it had already started. I had brought a change of clothes but decided to go in my work attire. Greeting familiar faces, I looked for Mr. Johnson but learned he was hospitalized. If Mr. Johnson isn't here, there's no point in staying. Maybe I should leave early, I thought. Just then, I heard a voice I didn't want to hear, cooing, "Oh, isn't that Tom?" It was Lisa, who had become even more flamboyant, or rather, more vulgar, than before. Beside her stood Ethan, rumored to be a fast-tracked elite. Watching Lisa look up at Ethan with a flirtatious gaze, I instantly knew he was her next mark, and Ethan didn't seem to mind. Lisa, dressed to the nines in luxury brands, and Ethan, in his elite-looking suit, glanced over me from head to toe and burst into laughter, clearly mocking my attire and work clothes. They were mocking me for wearing work clothes. "What's the matter? Is that the only outfit you have for such a grand reunion?" Just as one would expect from a man who got laid off for being incompetent, Lisa said, with a vulgar laugh. "Really, Tom, have some pride, even if you're laid off. Walking around like this. It's just embarrassing to think we went to school with someone at rock bottom," Ethan added with a smirk. Just as I thought Ethan and Lisa were nodding in agreement, Lisa suddenly poured the beer she was holding over my head. "Ah, that outfit suits you just right, you loser," she exclaimed. "Why don't you just leave? You are ruining the vibe here. I don't have time to mingle with poor folks," he said disdainfully, as both of them looked down on me with contempt. It seemed they didn't even notice how everyone around us was taken aback by their behavior. They probably thought I felt out of place in my work clothes. Pitying them, and not wanting to spoil the atmosphere for others, I decided to leave. "I get it, I'll leave," I said and headed for the door. The classmates around me chimed in, "You don't have to leave. You should stay longer since you've come all this way. And don't worry about those two." I didn't want to spend another moment in the presence of those two, standing in the center of the venue with their smug smiles and arms crossed, looking at me. I told my friends I'd catch up with you guys later and opened the door to leave. That's when a sleek, black luxury car pulled up. The appearance of a luxury car outside the restaurant caused quite a stir inside. Naturally, Lisa and Ethan made their way through the crowd, eager to get the best view of the car. Calculating as ever, Lisa was eager to find out who the car belonged to. Then, the chauffeur stepped out and said, "President Harris, your car is ready," saying politely. I could feel the atmosphere behind me freeze. "President Harris," Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. I glanced briefly at the two of them, then entered the car where Susan was waiting. I whispered in Lisa's ear, making sure no one else could hear, "Looks like Ethan's company is in trouble. You might want to start looking for your next guy soon." Then I slipped past the motionless Lisa and got into the car. "Hi, how was your day?" Susan greeted me with a smile as I climbed into the car. "It was okay." I let out a sigh, relaxing my shoulders as I answered. In fact, my new job turned out to be at Susan's family's company, by sheer coincidence. Which meant that the kind Mr. Williams, who had been so supportive, was actually Susan's father. He had appreciated my earnestness and diligence and had made me vice president. Susan and I had confessed our feelings for each other. We found comfort and ease in our shared history, and before I knew it, we were a couple. Mr. Williams, more than anyone else, was happy for us. Susan and I were even planning our wedding soon. I had learned about Ethan's company during my business dealings. Although it was a major company, there were persistent rumors of financial irregularities, and it seemed an investigation was imminent. Whether or not the rumors were true, a company with such a reputation wasn't a good business partner. It was clear that Ethan was heading into rough waters. As I looked out the window, I thought about who Lisa would latch onto next, remembering her scornful laughter. "They'll be fine," Susan assured me. "People like that always find a way to survive." I had to agree with her. Soon, we arrived at the hospital where Mr. Johnson was staying. He greeted me warmly, a bit frailer but with the same kind smile. "Wow, Tom, you've got a real man's look now." He grinned at me with a cheerful smile. "Mr. Johnson, I've always held on to the words you told me back then. I've followed your teachings, and now, I'm truly happy in both my personal and professional life. Thank you so much." As I reported this, Mr. Johnson smiled warmly, looking at Susan and me, and I deeply felt how fortunate I was to have such a wonderful mentor. Half a year after that tumultuous reunion, Susan and I happily tied the knot. At the company, I'm being rigorously yet kindly groomed by my father-in-law, the current president, as a successor. There's still much for me to learn, but I believe I'm living the most fulfilling days of my life right now. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't dared to switch industries back then, or if Lisa had stayed with me after I was laid off. But it's precisely because of that layoff and divorce that I have my current happiness. Those times were tough and embarrassing, but I'm here today because I persevered. There's no obstacle that can't be overcome, just as Mr. Johnson said. I never gave up, found what I could do, and worked hard at it. There will surely be more challenges ahead, but I'll continue to strive step by step, never arrogant or despairing, holding Mr. Johnson's words close to my heart. For Susan, who supported me, and for myself,